The COVID-19 crisis has undoubtedly been a major struggle for most of us as we grapple with being locked in our homes with spouses, children, and sometimes even aging parents. For some women, though, it's more than a struggle, it's a nightmare, as they are now locked behind closed doors with their abuser. Joining me now is Andrea Gunraj. She's Vice President of Public Engagement at the Canadian Women's Foundation. She has 19 years of experience in community-based work and a passion for innovative public education and nonprofit leadership for social change. Welcome to What She Said, Andrea.
Thanks for having me.
So why do you say that this pandemic is gendered?
Well, I think it's really important for us to look at not just the biological or the health-based elements of this pandemic, but look at how we actually live it and experience it. And I think that's where the gendered elements become very clear, that women are experiencing this pandemic very differently, that all genders will experience in their unique ways. But what we're seeing with women is really building on their existing issues and concerns. We see an increase in gender-based violence. That's one of the pieces that we've heard more about, and we'll talk about that soon. But we're also seeing things like economic impacts that women experience because of their position in the workplace and in the workforce. Their lesser access to good paying jobs and the kinds of roles that they tend to play in healthcare, their predominance roles in their frontline roles that they tend to play in many different sectors. We're also seeing that women are even reporting higher rates of worrying about this. And I think that's really related to their caregiving role in our homes and in our communities, that they've got a lot on their shoulders right now. And I think the pandemic is going to look different for different people. There's going to be shared elements and there's going to be our own unique experiences. And of course, women are not one big group. Women have lots of different diversities, and that is also a factor that we see, that racialized women, immigrant women, newcomer women are experiencing this pandemic in ways that really relates to their vulnerabilities in our society.
Okay, so if we're going to go just talk about the violence aspect of it right now, because I imagine that is almost unbearable for women right now who are locked behind doors with their abuser and never seemingly get a reprieve from it. So before the pandemic, sort of what are the statistics in and around abuse that you know of?
Well, that's a really great question, because I think people are talking about gender-based violence now in the context of the pandemic, but we have to remember that gender-based violence was really high always. And I think that we forget sometimes that before the pandemic, that every 6 days on average, a woman was killed by her intimate partner in Canada. So that's unacceptable. That's a high baseline rate. We see that, women are saying that they experience violence at a high rate, almost 50%. You see that in terms of not just physical violence, but also sexual violence, different forms of violence, the ways that it can play out in our lives. We're seeing that more than half of Canadians, 67% of Canadians, say they personally knew a woman who experienced violence. And I think it's really difficult to even measure sometimes the scope of it. It's so overwhelming because we know that this is a very underreported crime. All gender-based violence, but particularly domestic violence, things that play out in a home, in relationships, tend to be highly, highly underreported. They say anywhere from 8 to 15% of the cases are reported, and then that big number, that dark figure of crime, they call it, is unreported. And it's very difficult to really then understand the scope. And I think those of us who are women, those of us who are trans, those of us who are non-binary, we understand that this rate is very true to life, and we know how scared we feel on a day-to-day basis, how concerned we feel about the safety of ourselves and our friends and our other folks who are, at high risk of this violence. So it's no wonder that the rates then are increasing when we have this social isolation dynamic playing out and when we get stuck with people who are abusing us in our homes.
And I think that's, women now, for myself, those numbers that you just shared are alarming. Pre-pandemic, I thought about them, but to be fair, not like I'm thinking about them now. Oh. Because when you start to actually consider and empathize with somebody who is now trapped in a space with somebody who gets zero reprieve from the abuse, it becomes that much more impactful.
Yes.
So a woman right now is listening unfortunately, who may be being abused. Where can she turn for help right now?
Well, I think it's really important for us to speak to the fact that many services available for women, things like shelters, crisis lines, counseling programs, they're still open. And one of the things I've heard just this week, earlier this week, is that there may be a dynamic where an abuser is telling a woman, you have nowhere to go. And especially now, all the services are closed. Don't even try to get help. And I just want to say straight up, that's a lie. That's a myth. Many of the services are still available. They may look different. They might be online. They might be by the phone, but it's still possible for somebody to call. They don't necessarily have to go to 911 or go to the police. I know that's very difficult for people because there's lots of ramifications to that. You can still seek out support services. You can do it by phone. You can do it by text. You can do it online. I think an important one in Ontario, where I'm based right now, is the Assaulted Women's Helpline, for instance. That is available in 150 languages. That's 24/7. You can call and say, hey, this is happening to me. You can call if you even have a question. I don't know what I'm experiencing, but it's not feeling right. Is this violence? What can I do? I think that these services are so important because they're flexible and they take from where a woman is. They take from where a person is. And they just go from there. And it's not something that it's out of control for somebody who maybe calling the police or getting like that kind of authority involved might even make them feel more at risk. So I just want to, focus on that many of the services are still available. And yes, they're struggling. Yes, they're having a hard time right now, but they're there. The other thing I would mention as well too, you can actually find a lot of information online. And if you have access to the internet right now, I would even say just go to CanadianWomen.org. That's the website for the Canadian Women's Foundation. And we have a list of services available in every province and territory in Canada. They're just a suggestion of places that you can go. And even if you call a place and you don't get the services that you want and need, you can ask. And you might get a referral to something that is more appropriate for you or something in your region. So those are two just very simple things that I think people need to know right now.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about that 67% that know somebody. And as you know, you're now sitting at home, somebody's in this terrible position. They may be too fearful to do anything or say anything. What would you suggest women do who suspect that somebody is being abused at this moment?
That's such an important question. Thank you for asking that. I think that every single one of us, I could be overstating, but I don't think I am. Every single one of us at least knows somebody that we worry about, somebody that we feel, I don't know if they're safe right now. I think it's very important for all of us to do very, very simple things in terms of making sure that we know that we're sharing with other people that we're a safe person. I think there's no substitute at all for being a safe person. And what does that mean? For me, it means being proactive, to say to all your family and friends, you're not making any assumptions. So every single one of them, you're saying, listen, this is real. I've heard about it. I've seen it. Maybe I've experienced it myself. And I want you to know that if you come to me and you say you need support or something is happening to you and you don't even know what it is, that I'm here to listen. I'm here to support. I'm not going to take over for you. I'm going to take your lead and I'm going to believe you. Even that thing about believing somebody is very difficult. Saying, I won't blame you for this violence, because I think there's such a blame mentality in our culture, in our society. Even saying that, I'm not going to blame you. I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to support you. That is powerful. I imagine Canada, where everybody says this to their family and friends. I can't see gender-based violence being as high of a problem if every single one of us made that proactive step, simple step, to say, I believe women. I believe you. If you need help, you come to me. I'm a safe person. I will do what you need me to do. So I think that alone can really help with that number that we know, we suspect, but maybe we don't feel we can say anything, or maybe we feel uncomfortable. This is not something that you're taught, how to support somebody in a dangerous situation. So I don't blame anybody for feeling uncomfortable, but I do think that we have a responsibility to break the silence. And I think that's an easy way to do it.
Okay. So going forward, this pandemic's not going to last forever, although it does feel like it for some of us. It is, we are going to move on. but this violence is going to persist. So how do we break through this cycle and sort of continue to champion women's rights and make this a better space for everybody?
I have a few suggestions. I think you're right. This violence has existed before. It's going to exist now, and perhaps in the short term, really see like a bump, a spike, and then it's going to exist in the future. I think about young people who are witnessing this violence, perhaps at home now, more so because they're isolated with perhaps abusive dynamics in their home. We know that young people who see this violence played out, get that modeled for them, are more likely to play it out in their own relationships when they grow up. So this dynamic could actually take years to play itself out. And it's all perhaps in this kind of hotspot moment that we're in. So I think it's really important for us to remember that services and supports, programs out there that are doing this work on the grassroots level, they're well positioned to do it. They're well positioned to change attitudes and behaviors and actually help people in violent situations right there. They need to be supported. And I think that we need to really make sure that we give to them, first off, with our money, our talents, our time, and make sure that they aren't forgotten right now. And with the Canadian Women's Foundation, we're really concerned about our services that are working on this issue right now. We're really concerned about their ability to continue doing their good work. So I would encourage anybody who wants to support right now and doesn't know where to give, go to CanadianWomen.org. There's an emergency response fund that we launched to support programs like this and other programs to deal with gender equality issues. So even things like job training for women so that they have money to leave a dangerous situation. I don't want those programs to end either. They're all part of the spectrum of what makes people safer, what helps women get out of these vulnerable situations. So you can give to that fund. And I know this is a tough time financially, so every dollar helps. And even if you can't afford to give, but you know somebody who can, just be aware of this fund, that there's something going on specifically for those programs. That's number one. Number two, I think we really have to make sure that we insist that the people we vote for and our representatives see this as an important issue and prioritize it as a mandate. So I think that, we're seeing more and more about a national action plan on gender-based violence, something that the federal government has promised to do. But, especially with this pandemic, and perhaps it might not happen that quickly, or perhaps it might not get funded to the right degree, we can't allow that to happen. So I think we have to push for this for our representatives. We have to ask our representatives, even before we vote for them, what are you going to do on this epidemic that's a silent kind of echoing epidemic in the background?
Well, even just with this current tragedy that happened in Nova Scotia, a perfect example of something that was born out of a misogynistic hate crime, it's just awful. And so if they can ban guns based on this incident, then why not go after the real issue?
Yeah. You're very right. It's all part of the spectrum of what we need to do. We need to have strict gun control, and we have to then also get to the root causes of this violence, the misogyny, the sexist behavior, the attitudes about gender that make it seem okay that men should use this in their relationships. And it does spill out beyond a relationship. So it's not like we can just be like, oh, it's between him and her. Oh, it's behind closed doors. It actually puts every single one of us at risk, every single gender at risk. Men died here too. So I think it's really important for us to do that. And the National Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence is the one thing that I think is really kind of a key flashpoint that we all have to care about. And I think it's one of these things that has been talked about for many years, and we might see it happen now sooner. So let's push for it. Let's push for it. It's time that we did this in this country. Other countries have these types of action plans. Why not Canada? Canada could be a leader here.
I agree. So we're gonna get up your website on the video that goes out on social. We're gonna get up that national link for that national action plan. We're gonna keep the conversation going, and I thank you so much for joining me today, Andrea. This is a very important topic.
Thank you for having me.